Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to a new coffee with Kavanah. And I flew to Israel, but not just Israel. Came to the south, to Kibbutz Nirim. That's in the real south near Gaza. And it's a moment to have a pause, to reflect, and to listen to voices that carry not just stories but the pulse of humanity itself. Today, I am sitting with a woman whose courage and light emerged from one of the darkest places on earth, the Gaza border. Adele Raemer was born in the United States, but Israel became her home nearly 50 years ago. She's lived most of her life on Kibbutz Nirim, just 1 mile from Gaza, a place she was described at 95% haven until October 7th, 2023. Adele, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Roberto, so much for inviting me to your podcast.
Well, we can see the difference. What you see behind me is after October 7th, and what you're looking on Adele's picture, it's the reconstruction, and it's amazing. It's a big change between and only in 2 years, and that's also again the miracle of Israel and the people. But let me go back to 2 years ago. On that morning, Adele spent 11 hours locked in her safe room, listening to terrorists just outside her door. Her family survived, but her community was torn apart. And yet, Adele, she did not choose silence. She chose to speak, to bear witness, to defend the people, and to remain afterward rebuilding and also thinking that this is an act of resistance. So let me go to Adele now. Adele, can you, before we go to this tragic morning, what was the life like in Nirim before October the 7th?
So I have a tattoo on my arm, which is the poppy, which is the regional flower, and it says resilience.
Yes.
And I got this tattoo before October 7th. So even before October 7th, things were not quiet here. And I needed this reminder of the fact that I have resilience, because resilience is one of the most important things you need to be able to live here. So I came to live here in 1975, at which time the area was not a war zone. It was peaceful and quiet and 100% heaven. And I got married and had my children here, and it started losing its 100% heaven status when we gave back the Gaza Strip to the Arabs and the Hamas came into power in 2025 and started shooting rockets at us sporadically. You never knew what to expect. You never knew when to expect it. At the beginning, we didn't even have warning. Now, when we get an incoming rocket alert, we have 0 to 10 seconds from the second you hear that alert starting until the second you hear the explosion, 0 to 10 seconds. When it first started, the first few years, there was no warning. There was boom, and you knew that you had to run to take cover because it was often followed by more explosions, because there were mortars that, for some reason, they would shoot off one after another, 3 at a time. So that was your warning. And that's when we started calling this place 95% heaven, because 95% of the time it was still peaceful and quiet and green. The picture that you see behind me is of the new neighborhood that's being built instead of the neighborhood that was burnt down. But if I have a chance, I'll put up another picture of what the rest of the kibbutz looks like and what the kibbutz looks like today. It is beautiful and green and full of flowers and very well kept, and a wonderful place to raise children. There's no crime rate, zero pollution, and it's a very wonderful, strong community. And community is what builds resilience. And as I said, resilience, that's the name of the game.
Yes.
So before October 7th, we were already a strong community, a community that, although we had privatized, there was still a very high level of mutual responsibility. We pay very high taxes in order for the upkeep of our community and to subsidize education and health and welfare. And we truly care about each other. We're about 430 people before October 7th that lived here. And I know everybody and I know where they live, and
it was a big family.
I can't imagine myself living anyplace else.
Wow. When did you first realize that something was different that morning?
We had been expecting, in areas that have earthquakes, they say that the birds and the cats, the animals can sense an earthquake before it hits.
Yes.
So those of us who live here on the border with the Gaza Strip, we could sense when things were heating up. There was more gunfire, more sporadic rockets. And we were reading news articles about activities that the Hamas were doing on the other side of the border. And in fact, I have a Facebook group with 15,000 followers now. And not long after October 7th, somebody wrote me and reminded me that on September 12th, 2023, I had posted an article in the newspaper, not, something classified or secret, an article in an Israeli English language newspaper that reported on the Hamas making preparations, practicing on an area that was built up to look like a kibbutz, to go in and kidnap people. September 12th, you go into my group, you go back to September 12th, 2023, it's there. So we could sense that things were heating up. And in fact, I used to do my nails with gel. And that year, Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur, I went to my manicurist who lived in another Gaza border community, Kfar Aza, who suffered a terrible, terrible massacre on October 7th. And again, this was Yom Kippur before October 7th. And she was telling me that she and her husband are planning to go away for Yom Kippur, to go abroad. And they're worried about leaving their dogs in case there's an escalation. They said, we often go abroad and leave our dogs at home and our neighbor feeds them, but we're worried now because if there's an escalation, it could be a problem. So people knew, people were sensing things. We didn't know when. It was tense on the New Year. It was tense on the different holidays, but we're used to that. Like, it's something that happens. The Hamas, the terrorists, love to attack us, love to shoot off rockets when there's holidays or on Friday night when the family's around the Sabbath dinner table.
Yes.
So it wasn't that much of a surprise. What was a surprise was the infiltration. What was a surprise was the quantity, the brutality, the suddenness, the total overwhelmingness. That was what surprised not only us, but the army and the government and everybody.
Wow. And what went through your mind during those 11 hours in the safe room, knowing that your son was holding the handle to keep the door closed because that's an important issue. You cannot lock those doors.
When I got my safe room, my safe room was built. The government of Israel understood after 2009, 2010, they understood that all of the communities within 4 kilometers of the border, and later on it widened out to 7 kilometers. It wasn't enough to have the bomb shelters that used to service us in the Yom Kippur War and the 6-Day War and the previous wars. 0 to 10 seconds. You don't have time to run outside. You have to have a safe room in your house. So my safe room was built, as was all the safe rooms in my community, was built onto my house, an extension of my house in 2011. And when I got the safe room, I asked the head of security, how do I lock it? And he said, you don't. You're forbidden from putting a lock on it, because if something happens, if you have a medical emergency and you're locked inside your safe room, the medical teams will not be able to come in and save you. So I knew that the safe room doesn't lock. Not everybody on Nirim even knew that it doesn't lock, because it's got a handle that you pull closed, and when you pull closed, it clicks iron prongs into the framework, which lock it to the extent that if the house is impacted elsewhere with a rocket, the door won't implode and get blown open and endanger the people inside. But on that morning, we have an internal messaging system in our kibbutz, and I wrote on the system after they told us that Israel had been invaded and we should go into our safe room and lock our doors. I wrote there, but the doors don't lock. And there were all these people on my kibbutz that wrote me. They said, yes, of course it locks. You pull the handle and it's like this and that. And I said, no, it doesn't lock, because you click the handle, but anybody from the outside can open it unless you're pulling down on that handle. So that's what my son was doing, who was, thank God, visiting me that day. As it is, usually I live on my own. I'm a widow and my children are big and I'm in the house alone. So he was here visiting because his birthday is on October 8th.
Oh,
Somebody owes him a birthday party.
yes.
And he was there for the community celebration of our kibbutz anniversary. So he was with me, and he was in there for 11 hours, when not pulling down on the handle all the time, but when we heard the terrorists around outside our house, he was sitting on the floor and pulling down on that handle, because we heard them outside. We heard their voices. We heard them shouting in Arabic and shooting. And so when we were sitting in there, waiting at any second for our house to be invaded, the door to be burst into, and to be slaughtered, I was sure I was not going to see another sunrise. And at one point during the morning, all of a sudden, we started hearing noises of things breaking. And my son understands a little bit Arabic. And he said, they're saying, come back. So we didn't understand what that was, but I looked at him, he looked at me. We told each other that we loved each other and basically said goodbye and waited.
And how do you remember the moment that you realized that you had survived?
The moment that I realized that I had survived, the following day, when we were well on our way to Eilat, an hour away from Nirim, on the bus, when we were being evacuated, October 8th, that's when I realized, okay, I'm through this. We're through this. But I almost lost 3 of my grandchildren. My daughter and her ex-husband and their 3 children were on the kibbutz as well. So my daughter was in her house on her own, hiding under the bed, crunched up in the corner under the bed, hiding behind blankets and stuffed animals, so that when the terrorists come in, hopefully they wouldn't see her. And my 3 granddaughters were with their dad, my former son-in-law. And thank God he was armed. He was on the team of the first responders. He was on the team of the first responders, but couldn't go out to be with the other first responders because he was with my 3 young grandchildren, who at the time were aged 2, 6, and 8. And he told them he was sitting there with them in the safe room with his weapon, and they heard the house being entered. They heard things breaking. They heard shouting in Arabic, calling Allah Akbar and laughing. And he told the girls, hide under the covers. You can hear a loud noise, but don't come out from under the covers no matter what. And he waited until he saw the handle of the safe room starting to move. He kicked open the door and shot the terrorist right outside the safe room. There were another few terrorists in his house, and he started running after them, but then he realized that there were many highly armed terrorists outside, and that he didn't stand a chance, and if something happened to him, who would look after the children? So he cut his losses, went back into the safe room, got down on one knee, and raised his weapon, and waited. The next person to come through that door was going to get a bullet. And something I learned only this year on October 7th, when he gave his witness at our ceremony, at our memorial, was that I knew that his hearing had been impaired from the shot. When you shoot your gun in the best of situations, when you shoot an M16 rifle, you're supposed to have earplugs. So, of course, he didn't have earplugs. He was in a house where the acoustics are even worse. And he tore his eardrum, so he wasn't able to hear properly. So he told my 8-year-old granddaughter, if you hear the terrorists coming again, tell me, because I can't hear them. I can't hear. So that responsibility for the safety of herself, her father, her 2 young sisters, was on the shoulders of an 8-year-old. And, whenever I tell this story, I tell people I grew up in the States. And I don't know if your audience is familiar with this program, but there used to be a program, a satire called Hogan's Heroes. And it was a satirical comedy about, do you know the program? About American GIs who were captured by the Nazis. And when I was a child, I used to play pretend, saying, where would I hide in my apartment if the Nazis came to capture me? Or I hide under the bed, in the cupboard, behind the door. But never in my life did I dream that I would be hiding from the Nazis of 2023 in my home, in my kibbutz, in my country. But that's what we were doing. Hiding from the Nazis of 2023, who were there to kidnap or slaughter us. And it wasn't only the highly trained Nukhba terrorists. That was the first wave. But afterwards, they called their friends. They called the Arabs in Gaza and said, we've conquered these communities. Come over, steal what you want, burn what you want, destroy what you want, kill who you want, rape who you want. And they did so in the thousands with glee. And this was just incomprehensible. 6,000 people, 6,000 monsters invaded our communities that day. If you compare that to America, that's like 40,000 terrorists entering into the country at once. It's just inconceivable. For my community.
Yeah. Let me go. Excuse me. Sorry. Go ahead, please. Then I'll go ahead, please.
For my community that day, 5 people were kidnapped. 5 people were slaughtered. Of the 5 people who were kidnapped, the 3 women, Hannah, Nahora, and Rimon, were returned in November 2023 in the first ceasefire. And the 2 men, Nadav and Yagev, were murdered in the tunnels of Gaza. And their bodies were brought home by the IDF in August 2024. And that morning, another 3 people on our kibbutz lost their lives as well, people we did not know about. These were 3 brave soldiers who came from the I don't remember what it's called in Hebrew, but he was a very high commander, Asaf Hamami, yes, and 2 sergeants who he took with him. The rockets began at 6:29. Records show that the key was in his car at 6:34, and they were on their way out to Nirim. Why they came to Nirim, I don't know. But they drove by Nirim, they saw that there were already terrorists inside the community, and they were the first soldiers to face the terrorists. So while they were here, they put up a valiant battle. The 3 of them were killed, and their bodies were kidnapped to Gaza. So we did not know about this until weeks and weeks later.
Amazing. Let me go further because your testimony, it's shocking. But after October the 7th, you're giving the voice out of the border, not only in Israel, you're talking in the US. You've been an advocate long before October the 7th. What moved you to start life on the border with Gaza?
So before I get to that, I want to relate to what you said, that yes, my testimony was shocking. The most shocking thing about my testimony is that anybody who lived here experienced that. Thousands of people experienced at least that, if not worse, on that day. That's what's shocking. Yes. What prompted me to start Life on the Border, the Facebook group, was in 2011. We've been through a number of rounds of escalation where there were periods of days, even weeks, where rockets were shot, short range rockets. We're 1 mile away from the border. So we yes, get the mortars and the rockets. So we have periods of escalation, but even between the periods of escalation, there could be sporadic rocket fire. And it was during one of those periods that I was on a Skype call with a cousin who lived in New York. And I told him, it's crazy. We keep running back and forth to the safe room because we keep getting rockets. And he said, well, we don't hear about anything about that here. And that upset me. So I said, I got to do something about that. Yes, so I went into my safe room and I cracked open my laptop and I started a group called Life on the Border with Gaza, Things People May Not Know But Should. I don't know why I made it such a long name, but if you look for Life on the Border with Gaza, you can find it. And my original vision for this group was to find other people in the area, in the region, who can write about life on the border in different languages so that people all over the world would be able to read about it in all different languages. Very early on, I realized that it would just turn into a Tower of Babel, and we really needed to stick to English, to one language. And I encouraged other people to open up similar groups in other languages. Unfortunately, nobody did. But we've passed the 15,000 follower mark. So on October 7th, there were people on October 7th, as soon as the rockets started, and I was in my safe room, I was sitting on my floor doing Facebook Lives and telling people, I don't know what's going on, but I know for sure this is something different because the rockets are so intense from north of Tel Aviv to south of us. And there were people in that group who till today tell me, that was the first word that we got of that anything was happening. So it's important to me to tell people what's going on, what life is really like here. Because on one of my trips abroad, I was brought to Geneva to bear witness at the UN independent investigative committee. And I realized that they're sure that everybody who lives where I do are people who are running around with helmets and flak jackets and Uzis, and they don't realize that we're just normal people. We're just regular people, grandparents and grandchildren and paraplegics and Holocaust survivors and babies and everything in between. These are just regular communities. We're just trying to get on with our lives. So this is why it's been so important to me to talk about our lives, about the hard times, but also about the beautiful, wonderful times and the wonderful lives we've built for ourselves here. In addition, I had contacts with people in Gaza, people who I know believed that life could be different, that they would wanted to coexist with us, and we would do collaborative activities. In 2019, there was a marathon, a bike marathon, where youth on our side of the border and youth on their side of the border rode on bikes on the same day, wearing the same shirts that said on the back, "Freedom, Peace." And there were all sorts of activities that we tried to do in order to teach our children and their children that the people on the other side aren't their enemy. The people on the other side don't want to kill them. And unfortunately, tragically, the people I was working opposite on the other side are no longer there. They escaped before October 7th. Some of them have been killed. And I'm just hoping we're going to be able to find those seeds of peace that are going to be able to take the future generations into the future. Because
but what you are doing, Adele, what you are doing, I think that you are putting those seeds everywhere. And let me go to another question. What reactions have moved you the most during your travels on international speaking tours? Because I know you've been in the US, in some TV networks and other places, and people is listening to this testimony. What are their reactions?
Sorry, what's your question?
What are their reactions? I mean, while you are, let's say, Geneva, or you are in New York, you are whatever. I mean, in this international speaking tours that you are invited, because it's for me talking to you, even though I know the complete story, it's shocking because it's you are telling on first hand, but people that did not witness that day or the day after, what is their reaction?
So people ask me if I still believe in peace. And what I tell them is I gave countless tours of my community before October 7th. And every tour I would end up with them at the Western Fence, the fence which on October 7th was cut through, and next to the community, next to the neighborhood that was burnt down. The picture that you have behind you is right next to that spot. And I would tell the people that I was talking to that I am sure that the vast majority of people on the other side of that border just want the same thing that I do, to put food on their table, have safety for their children. And since October 7th, I still believe there are people there that want that, but I'm afraid I got my numbers wrong. I don't think it's the vast majority. And I think that is because, I'm a retired teacher and teacher trainer. So education is something that I've dealt with all my life. And I can tell you something. The Hamas are excellent educators. They've educated at least 2 generations to hate us. They've taught the citizens of Gaza that the highest thing that they could aim for in life was to be a shaheed, to be a martyr, and to kill Jews. And this is what the children are being fed with their mother's milk. And the only way that anything can change in the future is if that changes. Just like happened in Japan and in Nazi Germany, a re-education has to happen. And they have to understand that we're here, we're not going anyplace, we are a legitimate country, and that if they don't accept that, if they don't acknowledge that, then there can be no hope for their lives there. And we're more than happy. Israel is very good at making peace. We make peace with anybody who wants to make peace with us. We made peace with Egypt and with Jordan and the Abraham Accords. That's what we do. We make peace. And yet the whole world is taking this and twisting it and calling us genociders and colonizers and apartheid, and all these things are just lies and not true. They're blood libels. And this is the education that has to get through. This is the education that has to be done in Gaza, in the Palestinian authorities, and around the world. There's one teeny tiny little Jewish country among how many Muslim majority countries are there? 50?
Yes.
So, nobody can tell me that we do not have the right to our one little country. That has to be accepted by the Palestinians. And until they do, our lives are going to be... And
you often say, you often say rebuilding is my revenge. What does rebuilding mean to you personally and as a nation?
Rebuilding and coming back home. We're 752 days into this war, and there's still a war going on. People are acting like it's the end of the war. It's not, because there are still 13 hostages. Bodies of 13 hostages are still there in the terror tunnels of Gaza. We have to get them back. And until this war ends, we can't really start healing. I was a refugee in my own land for 627 days. After which time I came back, my community came back. We've rebuilt, you can see behind me, We've rebuilt. There's no signs of destruction left. Those houses were torn down Tisha B'Av 2024. Not this past summer, the summer before it. And this is what it looks like now. We said we're not living in Auschwitz. We're not willing to live seeing the destruction that was around us. The houses that were entered and not destroyed were refurbished so that they would look different. Somebody whose house was entered by terrorists who didn't want to go back to that house was given another house, and other people went into their houses. And everything that my community could do to rebuild, I was abroad a few times raising money in order to rebuild our community. We rebuilt a beautiful playground for our children. We added an entire room, large room, onto our kindergarten for psychological aid so that psychologists would be able to come to our kindergarten and work with children there, with the children and the parents, instead of a parent and a child having to go anyplace else to get psychological aid. They're coming here to us, and we have this room. We're raising money to build another kindergarten because we not only have 80% of our community come back, we're bringing in new people to live here. Because it's only if people live here that is the only way that we can keep our country. If we move away from here, the land that we don't live on, the land that we don't farm, is the land we lose. So that's why I say, coming back here to rebuild and to live well, that's my revenge.
Such a nice revenge, because it's important. What kind of international support do you think is most meaningful right now? Political, financial, or human empathy? Because I think humans, there's a lot to do over there.
There is so much denial out there. So much denial that it's scary. And that's why it's so important to me to get to other places, to speak to other people. You can't tell me it didn't happen. I lived it. We need all sorts of support. We need all of the support that you said. Some people can support with money. Some people can support with talking. Some people can support with education. Some people can support with politics. The countries that are turning against Israel, that were saying we can't be in the Eurovision, we can't be in the World Cup. How can this even be possible? How can it be possible that they're saying because of what terrorists did to you, you don't have the right to fight back and protect your country? That's just unbelievable. So anybody that can help with any of these things in any way is needed, because we're just the first course. Okay?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Radical Islam is spreading, and it's spreading quickly and violently, and we can see it all over the world. So we're just the first course. And if the world doesn't react properly with us, they're going to be the main course.
Yes, correct. And do you believe there's still a path to coexist? Or do you think that dream ended for now?
It's down to education. It's all down to education.
Do you think that
part of the
if
education,
you cross the border, do you think if you cross the border, you will be able to re-educate people there in Gaza?
Part of the education is not only in Gaza. Part of the education is what the countries of the world are telling
Yes.
Gaza. By the countries of the world telling Gaza, Israel is a pariah. Israel is not going to be allowed into all these international activities. That's education.
Yes. Absolutely, yes. And when you meet young people outside of Israel and they are confused and they are misinformed, what do you tell them?
So I have not been in a position where I've met any people who are anti-Israel. On all of the delegations I've gone on since October 7th, it's been either to lawmakers or to communities that have invited us. I met college students, but Jewish college students, and talking to them broke my heart, because I spoke to a group of college students in Texas and in New Jersey, and they were telling me that they have to hide their Jewishness, that they can't walk around with signs of Jewishness out, that they don't feel comfortable walking around outside with their signs of Jewishness. And as somebody who grew up in America, who was educated in a society that taught us to protect and preserve your minorities, and to appreciate cultural diversity, for this to be happening to the smallest cultural minority is just shocking, and it literally breaks my heart. And I'm here in Israel, a mile, 2 kilometers away from the Gaza border. I'm worried about the people about my cousins' children in the United States who are who have to hide their Jewishness.
Oh, if you had one message for the world listening today, one sentence, what would that sentence be?
Israel is the people of Israel. Israel, just like any country, sometimes has governments that you'll love and sometimes has governments that you'll hate. Americans, people don't judge America by Trump. The world cannot judge Israel by who happens to be in our government today or who doesn't happen to be in our government today. But the people of Israel, Am Yisrael, that's the people that comprise our country. And we argue with each other, and we make mistakes just like any other country does. But this country is based on very solid morals, very solid moral ground. We've brought so much light to the world, the people from this country, the people of Israel, Jews around the world have brought so much light. We have so much to give to the world that the world needs to understand that and appreciate for that, and not for whatever politics is happening or is not happening. And what I also always say is, Am Yisrael Chai,
Yes.
whether you like it or not.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it was more than a sentence, but it's important to hear this message. I mean, Adele, your courage is quite kind, and not the kind that shouts at. But the thing that you're building, it's amazing what you're doing. And time is flying, and even though I need to, we need to say bye to our listeners, and thank you very much for being here, and to our listeners. If Adele's voice moved you, you can follow her work on Life on the Border with Gaza, or support Kibbutz Nirim rebuilding through the Jewish National Fund, or also read The Times of Israel. She's a blogger. Her articles are awesome. So until next time, may your coffee be strong now, your heart open, and your faith in humanity unshaken. Thank you very much, Adele, to be here in One Coffee with Kavanah. So now, goodbye.
Thank you so much.